Every single word of this TV story is a lie, including if and but. I was so disturbed by this story of how an autistic kid was bullied and murdered by a couple of black predators that I had to go to a higher authority. I had to go above my pay grade. I had to go out to California and find Marlon Newbern, the former prison psychologist who's seen this incredible level of violence, mayhem, chaos, pathology in this black on white crime. He's going to walk us through what is really happening in these stories, and we're even going to go bigger picture on it. Let's look at this. Let's look at this video.
Well, a celebration of life service was held earlier today for 22-year-old Stephen Rouse. Rouse was stabbed in a Greenville parking lot early last week following a fight, police say. He later died at a local hospital. News Channel 12's Lauren Arnott attended the ceremony and spoke with his family.
It was a somber scene inside the doors of Greenville's Church of God, where family and friends gathered to celebrate the life of Stephen Rouse and also mourned his death. The pain is still present as Stephen Rouse's mother, Portia, grieved the loss of her 22-year-old son. Stephen Rouse died Tuesday.
And they chased him down like a dog and killed him.
He was stabbed multiple times behind a Greenville Walmart. Greenville police say the incident started off as a fight. His mother says he was bullied.
I want his life to be a testament that people have to stop bullying.
Rouse lived with Asperger's, a form of autism, according to his parents.
People need to be aware of, people that have special needs. It's just sad to hear about the violence and, what he had to go through.
The two men arrested in connection to the fatal stabbing are 21-year-old Michael O'Neill and 26-year-old Curtis Wade. They were both charged with murder.
Some evil bullies took that away from my boy. But I know my son, he would tell me, Mom, you gotta forgive him. You gotta forgive them for what they did.
A GoFundMe account has been set up to help cover the expenses of the funeral.
I first got wind of this story from a website called Opposing Views from a reporter named Karen Sun. Why don't we take a look at what Karen brings to this, additional information Karen brings to this story. Despite all the happy talk and the nonsense we just heard in that television story, Karen Sun figured this out. This was a long-term case of bullying, black on white. They met on the bus, and it got worse from there. A lot of times we use these words, autism, Asperger's, happy, to describe a person that is mentally handicapped. We do it to protect them, to give them opportunities, to give them a chance. But in this case, we see these words are really kind of disguising how vulnerable he is, what a target he was. And we're going to talk to Marlon Newbern about this in a minute, what it means to be vulnerable in the face of black on white hostility, black on white violence. Anyway, so the story starts out, continues to say he'd recently got his own apartment, started taking the bus. They got into an altercation. They chased him through the field where they stabbed him. Last words, tell Mom I love her. Here's some more details from the mother. And so I'm going to sit here and say this was a case of black on white hostility, black on white crime, black on white murder, and I can hear the trolls all around the country now saying, "Colin, you don't have any evidence that crime was racially motivated." Well, there's a ton of evidence, and it's time people who say that stop ignoring it. Did the people who committed this horrific murder against this This guy, you can only describe him as innocent. Think Forrest Gump. Did they leave a little note saying down with Whitey or we killed him because he's white? No. But in this town, in this place, in this country right now, if you just came across this person lying dead, and you had to say, what are the odds of a white person or white people being guilty of this? It would be X. What are the odds of black people being guilty of this? It would be some number time X. 3 times, 6 times, 10 times, 100, 1,000 times X. Black on white crime is wildly out of proportion. Tons and tons of videos on this channel and my old channel, which I'm reposting, on black on handicap crime. We're going to hear more about that from Marlon Newburn in a moment. But in the meantime, know this. This was not a random act of violence. Anybody who knows anything about mathematics knows this was not random. This was part of a pattern. A pattern that only cowards ignore, deny, condone, excuse, encourage, and even lie about. We're not going to do that here. Especially when the victims are so vulnerable. Okay, as promised, I told you all this stuff that happened to this 22-year-old autistic kid was way above my pay grade. So like Commissioner Gordon flashing the bat light into the sky, I knew we had to get the main man here. His name is Marlon Newburn. People who follow this channel know Marlon. He is the premier truth teller in the field of psychology on what's happening with all this black on white hostility, black on white crime. Marlon Newburn, now so happy to have you. It's been too long since you've been on this channel.
Amen. Way too long. So glad to be here. Pardon me, banging around the desk here. So.
Okay, well, I assumed you were banging somebody's heads around over there, so that would be okay. Now, Marlon, I sent you the TV story.
Yes.
And then I sent you a news story.
Yes.
The TV story, of course, showed that this was just a fight for no particular reason, and the news story was a lot more explicit. This was a case of black on white crime. Could you kind of break down what you saw when you saw this? Well, let's talk about that video, the news story.
Yeah. You know, there's one thing, and as I've told you before, as many times as I've posted on Facebook, I try to get across to the public. Black predators are, more than any other group, are the most sadistic. They do prey on the developmentally disabled more than anyone. When I worked as a prison psychologist for several years, we had to really, at times, because, you know, prisons now are mental institutions. So we had to constantly put in protective custody, those with Asperger's, those with developmental disabilities, because the blacks would just, for fun, beat on them and just, you know, sometimes kill them. I can't push that point across the most.
I mean, it seems like you know, in addition to beating, this was harassment, torture.
Oh, they do that, yeah. It's the suffering, the sadism. This is important to the black street predator. It's critical that they see, witness suffering, fear. They inflict pain. It's important to them. It's so hard. It's like you've told me several times. I've known you for a few years now. It's people don't know this, and you know, I've been doing what I've been doing so many years that you're right. They don't know this stuff. Where
let's talk about the victim. How much being, so he was a white kid and he was developmentally disabled. How much did each one of those factors play into this assault and murder?
Well, first of all, he's white, so he's a prime candidate for abuse and even murder. Blacks, I'm convinced, from the minute they're born, they're indoctrinated to hate white people. Obviously not all black people, but the majority. They're exquisitely sensitive to race, no matter what.
I've documented that a lot of times, how black
Yeah.
people are learning racial hostility at home, at school, in music, and even in church.
Yeah, in church. Black prisoners, right away when they come in, I've asked them, where do you get all those hostilities? Well, you're supposed to. These are not thinking people, okay? We're talking black street predators. They function on feelings, not thought. So if they were taught at a young age, hate white people, they do it. They don't question it. They just do it. There's no such thing in the black criminal class as a free thinker. They go with whatever the mob tells them to do. So,
Now, use the phrase there called the black criminal class. And so we know that 1 out of 3 of black men will be in prison, sometime in prison. And so I'm okay. So I'm concerned about them. But what about the other chunk of black people and their liberal white allies who ignore, deny, condone, excuse, encourage, and even lie about this kind of hostility and violence?
Yeah.
What can we say about them?
There's what I call a toxic tribalism among black people. Somebody I had a black church lady explain this, defending a black defendant who murdered his brother over some drugs. And the black church lady said, and I know this is anecdotal, but it's a gospel truth, so-and-so is very black. And very black means authentically black. In other words, they follow the toxic tribal line. You do not, you always back up a black person no matter what. You make excuses for them no matter what. Everything they do and anything happens to them is the fault of white people. So you have a right to be angry at white people because it keeps us down, and we are all down with the struggle. Even they have no evidence of this. They're living prosperous lives. These aren't poor people that are talking to me like this. And this lady wasn't. But she was telling me as if it were a virtue that the family of this killer, of his brother, they were very authentically black, which made them wonderful. And this is a lot of years ago. It's when I was first cutting my teeth in the field. And I said, what does that mean? What is authentic? I don't know, real black. And they just said, down with the struggle, an understanding that all our difficulties. I mean, it was just this was something I heard over 30 years ago. It's the same thing here today.
When you and I talk, it seems like, and when I'm doing these YouTube videos and in my book, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, it seems like there's always 2 levels of stuff. The top level is, listen, there's an enormous amount of public discussion now about how black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, including why police are always picking on black people for no reason whatsoever. So it's interesting to get into that and show how that is an enormous lie.
Oh, it is a lie. Yeah.
But on another level, what about the level of just reaching out to people and letting them know that they or their loved ones, whether it's an autistic kid or a grandmother, grandfather, uncle, or child in school, if they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, they are in an enormous amount of danger. Is there anything to that?
That's legitimate. Come on, it's you've heard the phrase, adolescent omnipotence. I can go anywhere I want, nobody's going to bother me. Come on, use your head. You can't go around where a lot of black people congregate, even where a few congregate. I don't care if somebody says that's racist. It's not racist. That's self-preservation.
You can't go there to the extent that you have some vulnerability in your life.
Correct. Exactly. Are you able to protect yourself? Are you able to defend yourself?
It's so people talk about whether a neighborhood is safe or not, and I said, well, I don't even it doesn't have any meaning to me. What has meaning to me is if you took a 62-year-old woman with a bag of groceries, 9 o'clock at 8, let's say 8 o'clock at night, and had her walk to and from the grocery store 100 times over 100 nights, how many times would she be the victim of horrific racial violence? If the answer is more than 0, then that is a dangerous neighborhood.
Yeah, It's hard to explain to people. We all like to look at, most of us, normal, mature adults, like to look at everybody as relatively stable, we run into. But there are many, many, many black people, especially street predators. There is no conscience there. It's evil, the complete absence of empathy. Targets of opportunity. There's no such thing as, oh, they are too old, I will not harm them. Their function is, look at the money on that. This is going to be a walk,
And so their viewpoint is the opposite. So it's not if they're too old, I can't touch them. It's they're old, thus they are more touchable.
Yes, that's a great target of opportunity.
I've been doing a lot of videos here about black on old senior crime. I just call it old person crime because, sometimes when we use the word senior, that's kind of a sign of respect. But here, it really kind of, sometimes these terms we use, they really kind of obfuscate or cover up what is really happening. And this is black on vulnerable old people crime happening a ton. For the same reasons, I think, as this... as you tell me, as the same reason for this, the reason this 22-year-old autistic kid was
precisely
targeted.
It's target of opportunity. They go with the path of least resistance. So if they see some white guy that's worked out in the gym for 5 years, they're going to take a pass on the guy. It's too much. You also have to understand that they don't mind going to jail. A black street predator. It's not an issue. It's just, what's the easiest way I can get what I want and get out of there?
Okay, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up because now the big buzzword around the country is criminal justice reform, which means there are too many black people in prison for no reason whatsoever. Are there a lot of, and we know there's an enormous disparity. Are there between black and white people who are arrested, convicted, sent to jail, once they're released, sent back? Are there too many black people in prison?
No, there's not enough. I mean, come on, you wouldn't have dead cities like Detroit if you'd put enough in. What did that woman that turned loose that one cop killer? Did you see his history, his arrest history and conviction?
It was catch and release.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane.
Okay, so I'm a judge. This guy came before me. I look at him and go, it was so terrible. Of course, that was an anomaly. It could never happen again. What kind of person thinks that?
Somebody that's afraid to really assert their position. I mean, really. That's afraid to come across. I don't want people to think I'm bad, so I want them to think I'm good. So I'm going to give this guy 73 chances.
There's so much catch and release going on, and the catch and release speaks directly to the whole idea of this disparity in prison. And so we get all these guys that are, whether they're shooters or robbers or whatever, they are invariably have really long records. Doesn't that really speak to this whole quote unquote criminal justice reform that Black Lives Matters has been so good at getting onto the national radar?
Yeah, I mean, it's so silly. If you see what these guys have done, and now understand this is what they were caught at, okay? Can you imagine what they weren't caught at? Plus, I have to throw this in there, and being from the mental health background, a lot of judges use mental health as a scapegoat, It's the magic of therapy will change the person from bad to good.
So they're counting on you to
it's insane.
So what's it like? So you confront these guys they have an initial appointment in your office in a prison. They come in, they're all sorry, they want to change. They're really cooperative, they're respectful, they're happy.
Oh man, and you let me out, and man, it's all different now. I mean, I'm gonna rebuild the city. Most of them want to go back and be activists. So they do. Most of them do. I'm going to be active in the community. And I said, you can barely spell. How can you be active in anything? I confront them. I'm not a social worker. Nobody gets a hug. I just tell them, I said, you can barely tie your own shoelaces. You've done nothing but commit crimes since you were, 12? Most of them start using drugs when they're 12. That's their first blunt. And
let me ask you this. I mean, if you listen to the Black Lives Matter crowd and lots of other people, apparently it's very easy to end up in prison if you're black. You just break the law, a little law, and all of a sudden, nonviolent crime, boom, you're going to prison first time, done. Is that reality?
No. You really have to do something really bad to finally go to prison. Male, female, it doesn't matter. Black, white, it doesn't matter. You really have to really do something horrendous, because most of the time it's plea bargaining. They reduce, which it should be a felony aggravated assault, and they'll plea it down to misdemeanor. And they walk out of court, they're smiling, grinning from ear to ear. They only did a month in jail, and it's like where if somebody told me or you, like, hey, you're Colin, you got to go to jail for a month. Like we go, you got to be kidding me. Whereas these guys are like, hey, it's nothing. 6 months, nothing. And it's, I skated. That's what as
so
I
when
used
you
to
when you see all this, it's really popular on TV now.
Yeah,
when you
sure.
see all this talk about racial disparity, Black Lives Matter, criminal justice reform,
it fuels the black crime element. It fuels it beautifully. So they're slitting their own throats.
What do you mean by that?
Any aberrant behavior. This is behavioral psychology, hard and fast, does not fail. Any aberrant behavior, any, what's the word for aberrant, the simple word? Any corrupt or violence or illegal behavior, antisocial behavior that's supported, defended, financed, and where personal responsibility is displaced, will result in an increase in that behavior. So when little Johnny first starts acting up and Mama goes racing to the school and cusses out the principal and cusses out the teacher, little Johnny's sitting there going, look at this. I was a jerk, but Mama's right there. Okay? Well, guess what happens to little Johnny after a little while?
A quick question.
Okay?
It's not just Mama, though, is it? In a lot of these cases. You got a principal. The mama might yell at the teacher, but the principal comes. Yeah, the principal comes in and goes, sorry about that. Our bad. We failed your child.
Correct. And they've removed responsibility. Rather than say, listen, you just birthed a little hemorrhoid, and he's acting out in this doggone school, and he's not allowed to. Okay? Now, I ran an alternative high school for a little over 3 years in Lake Orion, which is predominantly white. And that was like the mother lode of where criminals come from. Now, it didn't have very many, all right? But an alternative high school, for people that don't know, those are kids that are not doing well in the regular high school. So they send them to the alternative high school. Hired me because I have the forensic psychology background. And I was there for a month, and I even went to the superintendent. I said, a blind man could see what's wrong here. He said, what's wrong? I said, you've made more excuses for these kids acting out. They've never been held accountable. Well, this is not a court or anything else. I said, you hired me to clean it up? I'll clean it up. Do you want me or not? Want me to do so? Well, yeah, do what you can. Well, the place was out of control. The last principal sued them and won because she didn't get defended against some of the thugs. Well, the ones over 16 I threw out. Get out of here. They're not students. They're space takers. They're bullies, got rid of them, and then the ones 15 and under who were continually acting out, I took to juvenile court. And they got sent to a correctional facility where they paid for it, the parent did. But in every case, take this to the bank. Get a tattoo that says this, okay? And at every case where the parent came in, storming in, they'd come in screaming, a lot of hysteria. They would say, Junior, my son would never, or daughter, never do all that. Well, there's witnesses, they got a whole classroom of witnesses. But I wouldn't back up. I said, okay, they're suspended now for 2-3 days. They do it again, they're kicked out. If they're 15 and under, we go to court. That's how it works. They'd call me everything you can think of. These are white parents. And every case where a parent did that, that kid went to prison or jail eventually. No exceptions.
You know,
That
the thing
was-
that's and so to
That
take
was
to
the
take
ultimate
to,
lab.
to take that mechanism of excusing, condoning this incredible bad behavior, white or black,
Yeah.
it seems like, you know, among the black people, a lot of black people and their liberal allies here, that almost seems to be institutional.
It is institutional in the black community. Automatically, they're not guilty no matter what it is.
And now the big reason is racism.
Yeah, they've always got it. And the blacks know this, black violators. They know somebody's going to come crawling out from under the woodwork like a damn cockroach and defend them. They know this stuff. They don't mind jail. They prey on each other in jail. They prey on whites in jail and in prison. It's just fun. They have people that are just down with the struggle, going to defend them. So when they sit there and the cop says move, I don't have to move. And if the cop gets a little too rough, man, I'm going to make it on TV and I might get paid. Get paid means go to a lawsuit and, you know, sue. And of course, there are people that comes crawling out of the woodwork saying that cop was too rough on him.
You know, let's finish up by going back to that TV story there, where everybody was saying this started out as a fight. It was a case of bullying. This seems
Autistic
to be
kids cannot fight. Okay, they cannot. That's baloney. An autistic kid has a problem. They focus heavily on one thing at a time. They're capable of doing well in life as long as they have a structured interest. And but as far as fighting, they're probably the least aggressive people you're going to run into. So
it seems like this story, in a way, fits in a pattern of other stories where you must minimize, you must excuse, you must condone, you must do anything
displace
but say,
responsibility.
You displace responsibility. You must do anything except say this was a part of a pattern of black on white, whether
Sadistic
it's black, sadistic violence. And
Yes.
well, you know what? That's why I think you're the most important psychological voice in America today. Is you're the one speaking truth to this pattern. I think what you're saying here today, what you said in the past, is saving a lot of lives. Marla Newbern, you're going to go out and get yourself a camera to replace your old one. We're going to go at this again at length, again on this channel. And I cannot wait for that. Mr. Marla Newbern out there in California, thanks so much for being here and helping us out.
Glad to do it. Anytime.